Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Walt Disney Q&A. It is the series in which you guys throw questions my way regarding anything Disney, the parks, the movies, the history, the cartoons, and I try to give you answers to the best of my abilities, even if sometimes that answer is, I'm not sure that's a good question. This week we're at the Animal Kingdom. Somebody pointed out that I don't visit the Animal Kingdom very much during these episodes, so I'm going to try and spend the whole episode here, and I have 10 great questions that I picked out of the comments that you guys have left over the past few weeks, and we're going to talk about Disney for a little bit. So let's just jump right in, and I'm going to jump off with, I think, a great question. Comes from Jeremiah Rivera, who asks, do you think that Disney will ever produce another 2D hand-drawn animated film in the future, after what appeared to be a slump in the box office sales of recent 2D films like Princess and the Frog, and the general direction of film animation towards strictly 3D and CGI? What are your thoughts on the style of animation now versus what it used to be in relation to the Disney company? Do you wish there were more hand-drawn films nowadays? This is a fantastic question. Of course, he's talking about, now you with Frozen and Tangled, and, Pixar sort of popularized 3D animation, and we've sort of seen 2D animation go, the way of the ghost. It's just not around anymore. Do I think they'll ever go back to it? I actually do think they will. However, I don't think it's going to be anytime soon. I think 2D animation's beautiful. Looking back at old 2D animation, this isn't Disney related, but recently I've been watching Miyazaki's films, which are the Japanese animated movies, and his movies go back to the 80s up until just recently one of them came out, and they're beautiful. And so I do think that there is beauty in 2D animation, and do think it will exist, and I think Disney will make them, but I think it's going to have to take some time, because I think what's going to bring it back to 2D animation is sort of like a nostalgic trip. I think you're going to see the demand go up as the kids who are growing up now on 3D animation get older. 2D animation might become more of a novelty to them, and it might appeal to them, and it'll appeal to the nostalgic part of people my age who are now just starting to reach the age where, pretty soon we're going to start to become parents. And I think that'll be enough to support financially a revitalization of 2D animation. And I think you're already seeing it a little bit. I think if you've checked out the new Mickey Mouse cartoons that are on the website and on the Disney Channel, and I picked them up on iTunes because you get the whole season for like $3. They're these beautiful 2D animated shorts, and they're very much in the same vein of the old Mickey cartoons. Very stylized. I think that's what we're going to see. I think when you see 2D come back, it'll be extremely stylized. It won't be something like The Lion King and Little Mermaid. I think there'll be much more artistic flair to it. And I think that's just something you see with art. When you look at traditional art, and I guess even film, live action film, so much of technological growth in that medium is trying to replicate real life as closely as possible. With painters, you had painters trying to recreate real life as much as possible, and then you get to the point where that fidelity is so high that there's nowhere else to go with it. And so that's when you start to become more expressionist with your art, and that's where you see like painters like Picasso pop up, where it's not at all realistic, and that's sort of the point, right? I think animated films are going to be like that. Right now we're at a point where they're still kind of cartoony, and that's because there's something called the uncanny valley, and that's when something looks real enough but not close enough to reality that something feels off and you feel a little weirded out by it. That's the uncanny valley. Disney avoids it very much by sort of leaning towards a more cartoonish character design and world design, but eventually we're going to be able to do that without a problem. I mean, you already see movies a while back like Beowulf trying to do that. By the way, is this Primeval World we're going on? Awesome. Have not written this yet. Whoops. Ooh, my game's acting all weird. There we go. Let's hop on. Wait. It's gone now. Oh no. Maybe the server's acting a little weird. But this is where I think 2D animation is going to go. I think you're going to see it more in a expressionist, artistic, light when it comes back, and I think that'll be really cool. I mean, just imagine a animated feature film in the style of these new Mickey Mouse cartoons. I would love that, and hopefully it's sooner rather than later, but I think realistically it's going to be later. So thanks for that great question. Next up, I have a question from, this is probably the most entertaining username, from blah 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 poo, who asks, I plan on going to Disney next summer, and I'm wondering how much time I should spend on dining. I really want to try eating at the restaurants instead of the generic quick meals they have, but I don't want it to take away from time spent on attractions. How do you spend your time at Disney? Thanks and keep up the good work. Well, thank you, blah, 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 poo. Dining at Disney is a very, not controversial subject, but I think everyone's got their own take on how it should be done, and I am no different and have my own take as well. The way I approach dining when I visit Disney World, because I feel like that time is very valuable to me because I don't go very often, like, you know, somebody who might live in Florida and be able to visit it often, is I will do one sit-down restaurant a day, not counting breakfast, and then the rest of it will just be sort of quick meals. So, you know, when I went with friends in 2012, which was like the last time I went, the way we worked is because we were sort of older and not like, we didn't have the energy, I don't think, anymore to just get up at the crack of dawn and go for rope drop. So we get up and we enjoy our breakfast, and we'll sit down and eat breakfast. And then out of that, dinner and lunch, one of those we'll sit down to and have a nice, relaxing, like, restaurant experience. And then the other will be a quick meal. And part of that is so we're not eating too much, and part of that's so we're not spending too much time eating. Prior to 2012, I went in 2010 with one of my friends, and we had the free dining plan. And because of the hotel we were staying at, our free dining plan allowed us for, I think it was like 2 sit-down restaurants a day. And we found it to be a little bit too much because we wanted to go on rides, and we weren't going for as long as I ended up going in 2012. And so spending all that time sitting down, it felt like a waste for a lot of food. And, you know, I think while Disney does food really well, I don't think they do anything so exceptionally out of the norm and unable to get anywhere else that you need to use that time. Like Le Cellier's is a steakhouse, and it's a really good steakhouse, and they do really good steaks. But they don't do steaks so good that, like, if I think, where am I going to get the best steak in the world, it's Disney World, you know? So I never feel the need to devote as much time or dedication to getting my hands on that steak and, you know, eating it out. Personally, when it comes to, like, places to eat, I don't even think of the food as much as I think of the theming of the place, because for me, that's what Disney is. It's immersing yourself into another world, and the food places are no different. And that's why, you know, even though the food might be generic at a place like Cosmic Ray's Starlight Cafe, I'll actually enjoy going there to, you know, some other restaurant that might have better food but just be sort of a run-of-the-mill restaurant. So I'd say pick one place per day, you know, eat the fast meals before that or after that, just the other meal of the day, and enjoy the theming and pick based on that, I think, is the most important thing. But good luck and enjoy your trip, blah, 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 poo. Next up, we have the franchise. I'm getting a little lost here in the Animal Kingdom. I think part of the reason I don't tour here as much when I'm doing these Q&As is because I don't know them like the back of my hand the way I do the other parks. So I just sort of end up wandering until I'm lost. Next up is the Franchise 50, who asks, Hey Rob, now I know that Walt Disney wanted Epcot to be an actual functional city, and of course he passed away and it didn't happen. But what if he was alive during that time and it did become a success? How do you think Disney would be now if this ever happened? Personally, I'm very happy with the current Epcot. Love to hear your response. So I've talked about this in the past, so I'm going to sort of approach it from a different angle. You know, Walt wanted Epcot to be a functional, futuristic city of tomorrow that would act as a model for cities around the world. And that never happened because he passed away, and Roy and the others at Disney felt that it would just be impossible to create that without somebody like Walt behind it. Personally, I don't think it would have stood a chance even if Walt was around, and I think part of that is just because while Walt had great intentions, I don't think he'd realized how quickly technology would progress in our world today, and I think that would be a limiting factor. You know, his dream was of the city where If GE came out with a new fancy refrigerator, everyone in the city would get one, so people visiting around would be able to go, oh, look at this great fancy refrigerator, let's all buy it. Today's world, that doesn't really work that way. I don't need to see somebody with an iPhone to know that I want an iPhone. All I need to do is look it up on the internet or see, videos online. People around the world who get it can show it. I don't need to go to a place to see it. And so that doesn't really work out. You have companies like Apple and Microsoft, they don't really like showing off their technology until they're ready to sell it because they don't want competitors to copy it. So, I mean, all these little things come together where I think Epcot wouldn't work the way he wanted it to. And so, honestly, I think there could have been a great risk that Disney might not exist today if he was still alive to pursue Epcot. You got to remember, Disney at that point wasn't a media empire the way it is today. In fact, they were in financial troubles after he died, and that's what it sort of took Eisner to save them from, which we'll talk about later in the episode. And so it's not crazy to think that he might have put all of the Disney money into the city, and if it failed, Disney wouldn't have any money, it'd go out of business, and there'd be no Disney company today. And that's crazy to think of, right? So it's just amazing how these little details can totally change the path of a company or history, right? Next question comes from Daniel Burns, who asks, where are we going? Let's go this way. Hey, Rob, what do you think about a Star Wars themed, this is a good one, a Star Wars themed World Showcase? Would it be replacing the current one, or would you put it in an entirely new park? What would you put in it? Also, what do you think about a miniature Marvel theme park housed entirely inside of a 1-to-1 scale helicarrier? Wow. That's an awesome idea, Daniel. I mean, on the realism scale, I don't think they can really put Marvel stuff in Orlando. And building a 1-to-1 scale helicarrier would be an amazing constructive feat. So I don't think it's very realistic, but I think that would be super awesome if they ever did that. And a Marvel theme park would be cool. A Star Wars theme park would be cool. I love your just approach of making it like a Star Wars themed World Showcase, though. That's something I never even had considered. Let's go this way. We'll go over to the Tree of Life. How do we get to the Tree of Life? That's a good question. Without parkouring to it. That would be great. Like a World Showcase with like Hoth and Endor and Yavin 4 and Tatooine and all these different places. That'd be really cool. A really interesting way to pull that off. I think if you were going to do that, though, you would have to make that the bulk of the park as opposed to Epcot where it's half of the park, and then you'd have to put an attraction in each one. Because while World Showcase sort of has its purpose in, showing people about that country and the world, you can't really do that with a Star Wars World Showcase because they can't actually go to the real Tatooine, right? So, you want to have some attraction there to justify Disney building it. That's a really interesting idea, though. That's cool. What Star Wars planets would you guys want to see in a Star Wars World Showcase? That's my question for you all. Next question comes from Lunar Distortion, who asks, what company do you think Disney should buy next, if any? I personally think they should buy Lego. Lego and Disney are already fairly close. They could possibly get Legoland, and think about how much money the Lego movie made. Well, I like that you're thinking about it like an entertainment CEO, or it's like the Lego... Is that a flying helicopter? The Lego movie made a ton of movies, so maybe we should look at that property. That's funny. Lego would be an interesting company. I don't know if they would sell, but that's definitely an interesting perspective, and it's definitely in the vein of Disney recently buying companies that are already established. I think a company that Disney would buy next, if they're looking to become more well-rounded, would be a video game developer or publisher, because that's sort of an area. Oh, Pandora, that's what that 3D thing was. That's kind of cool. That's sort of the field that the Disney company has been lacking in. They do the mobile stuff, and Disney Infinity is pretty big, but when it comes to like AAA console experiences or computer games, Disney's never really known what they're doing, and they have this unfortunate reaction where if something doesn't work out well, they just shut it down. Split Second was a Disney produced game, And, that was poorly marketed and poorly put out there, even though it was a pretty decent game. And then they shut the studio down. And that's just like a thing they did whenever that happened. And now that they have these great properties like Marvel and Star Wars, like they should be doing stuff in-house. They don't need to just sell it off to EA like they've done. So I would like to see them, if anything, buy a publisher, maybe like a Ubisoft. Or if they're going to, turn something around, do EA or Activision and turn it around. Activision might be too big for them. Maybe EA? I don't know. But one of those two. Next question comes from Mr. Static Blitz, who asks, okay, we've done a lot of the, by the way, Animal Kingdom. I feel like I'm going in circles and I can't tell. We're going to go for one more question, then we're going to go to another park. Mr. Static Blitz asks, I went to Epcot over spring break, and my dad and I were talking about how Disney always looked into investing into the transportation of the future, and we joked that Disney wouldn't want buses in Walt Disney World. Instead, he would want everyone on Segways. Do you think this is too outlandish of a thought? Also, after Kodak ended its contract with Disney to sponsor the Journey to Imagination Pavilion, and after the refurb on the Enchanted Tiki Room back to the original, do you think they would do the same thing to the Imagination Pavilion? Would you want to see the return of the original attraction? I would, because of the message of the original ride. It fits with the pavilion. That's one about senses. Great question. Let's tackle the first one first. Transportation. Walt was super into transportation. In fact, if you think about it, and we're going to warp on over to the MK, the Wedway People Mover was how he intended people would get around in Epcot, going from, house to the downtown area and vice versa. And then monorail to go from Epcot to other parts of the park. And there wouldn't be many cars used. So yeah, he was definitely thinking forward with transportation. I don't think he would like the buses as they are now. I don't know about segways. I don't think that's very realistic either, because it sort of takes the mass transportation out of it. It's a lot of power being used. I think if he was anything, the good middle ground would be maybe he'd like to see a fleet of electric buses, like electronic vehicles, because they're environmentally friendly. They're sort of futuristic. I think that'd be the sort of thing that would go on. Oh, look, I love the signs that they've added. They're really cool. Emporium. This is neat. So that's what I think he would think about that. Or just get like a Wedway system to go to all these hotels and, just constantly moving that you hop on and ride to. As for your second question, I don't know if they'd ever go back to it, like just verbatim recreate the original. But I do think they might go back at some point. Here's the thing. I used to think they would never do that. And I think the reason I thought that is because Iger's not big on original content. Everything's about acquiring something, using that property, tying it into something else. But Iger's on his way out. I think he's retiring in 2016. Where are you going, buddy? And I think with Pandora on its way, you're not going to see anything happen at Epcot for a while. So it's very reasonable that the time Disney looks at Epcot again to do something, it's going to be under somebody else. And that somebody could be totally into, bringing back like Figment in a new way. And I think that would be the important part, is making it a new way, because as much as I love some of the old rides, Disney is all about moving forward. Hey, it's a Creeper Chef. Hey, Creeper Chef. So, great question. That's what I think would happen. That's what I think he thinks about transportation. But we can only guess, right? Walt's been gone for a long, long time. So it's hard to tell at this point what Walt would have wanted. Which is why it's important that the company doesn't sort of drive itself on that message. Anyway, next question comes from Andrew Seibel, who asks, I was wondering if you think Disney will ever bring back paper fast passes in addition to the My Magic Band. Also, do you think that Disney World needs a new park, and if so, why? This is a quick and easy one, actually. I think, no, Disney, I don't think needs a new park. I think 4 parks is plenty. Whenever I go down there, I feel like there's more than enough to do. And I think that the infrastructure allows for them to add new rides so that they can add new content without having to build a whole new park. As for paper fast passes, I think that era is over. Maybe one day if financially they're in trouble, but you have to understand that the benefits of the My Magic Bands are so much greater than just that they're stylish and look cool and easy for the user. You have to realize that RFID chip means that they can track where you're going in the park and what rides you're riding, and that data is so much more valuable than, just the money saved on paper fast passes, because then they can look and go, well, everybody rides on Test Track afternoon rather than before noon, so maybe we could do something to incentivize it, like things to make the user experience better. But that data is without a doubt super valuable, and I just don't see them ditching that anytime soon. Next question comes from Disney World Genius, who asks, why don't people like Michael Eisner? When I talk about Disney with people, they bash him quite a bit, and I don't know why, because I personally liked him as CEO. So this is sort of a touchy subject, because people do have strong feelings one way or another for Michael Eisner. He was the CEO from 1984 to, or was it 85? It was the mid-80s until like the mid-2000s. So he had a good 20-year tenure here at Disney. And when he originally started, he was with somebody named Frank Wells. And while he was CEO, Frank Wells also had a very high position. And they sort of had that same dynamic that Roy and Walt had, where one was focused on the sort of creative entertainment aspect while the other was on the operational day-to-day. And they sort of had a checks and balances with each other. The reason why some people love Michael Eisner is because he saved Disney. I think there's no debating that Disney was in financial trouble when they took over. That's why Roy Disney fought to have them step in and take over the company, and prevented the Disney company from being broken apart and sold off into pieces. He also brought a lot of what we love about Disney World to Disney World. Hollywood Studios, the Animal Kingdom, just like plenty of new rides, all these hotels, the Disney Renaissance, the animation Renaissance, Little Mermaid, all that stuff. He brought in Jeffrey Katzenberg, who was the sort of person behind all these movies, Beauty and the Beast. Disney, that Disney of the 90s existed because of Michael Eisner. Now, that said, a lot of people don't like him because that sort of corporate image of Disney also exists because of Michael Eisner. Like, one of the first things he did when he took over was he hiked up the price of the park tickets big time. And that's because Disney wasn't acting like a company where the bottom line was the profits. They were acting like a company run by Uncle Walt, where, they wanted a good experience over, the company's benefit. And he had to stop running it that way and run it more like a company. And it was sort of a shame, because as a company, you just have to run it as a company. I don't think he was doing it maliciously. I think he just needed to keep that company afloat. And, he had a very distinct style of that we see Iger doing the opposite today, of where he didn't want to spend money on big names or big talent. He would get cheap names and cheap talent that had original ideas and would bet on small film concepts. And that's really what took Disney Studios off the ground. So Michael Eisner did a lot of great for Disney. But, there's that saying, what is it? You die a hero or live long enough to become a villain. And in a weird, twisted sense of that, he was at the park for a while. And unfortunately, Frank Wells passed away in a helicopter accident in the 90s, the late 90s. And rather than finding a replacement, Michael Eisner just took over. And so he really had some unchecked power there. He had the board on his side. He really just could do, as a CEO, pretty much whatever he wanted. And the problem with that, you'll see with creative types, is sometimes you don't have people who are willing to step up and say, this idea is bad. And so you saw a lot of bad ideas. It's interesting how he passed on a lot of good ideas. Of course, now that I'm trying to think of it, the one is blanking on me. Lost on ABC, the hit show Lost. He wanted to axe it, and they eventually were able to prove that it was good enough. And I mean, look at what a great show that was. He just had an ego about him, and it was very anti-Disney, and it was very super corporate, and that's why people, I don't think, liked him. He was also one of the highest paid CEOs in history, which, to his credit, wasn't because his salary was the highest. It was because he based a lot of it on stock performances. He had a lot of stock bonuses. So his idea was, if the company did well, then he would do well, and the company did really well, so he did really well. So, he's like the super rich CEO type, unchecked power. He wouldn't step down gracefully, and that led to a bad taste in a lot of people's mouths. And that's why he's sort of got this mixed history. If you ever want to read more about Eisner and just sort of his reign at Disney, the book Disney War is, I think, by Stuart something. I'm going to have to look it up at some point. Is a fantastic, fantastic book. It's kind of long, but it pretty much details his entire tenure at Disney and gives a pretty equal and fair look at it, too. It doesn't, put all the blame on him, but it doesn't paint him in a positive light either necessarily. So I highly suggest. James Stewart is the author of Disney War. Definitely recommend it if you're interested. And it gives you an insight of how Disney works as a company as opposed to just, this cartoon factory or theme park factory. It's a company. Anyway, next question comes from Kid Fluky, who asks, what is your favorite food item at Disney? My favorite food, not regarding price, but just taste. Second question, I feel the Hollywood studio should have an experience where you could create your own movie and make it very cool. Green screen special effects and hired actors to take pictures like you're famous for extra money. Do you think this would be a good idea? It would be an interesting idea, Fluky. I think that second idea is a little unrealistic, just coming from a place of having worked a little bit on the indie film scene in New York for a while and just going to film school. That would be a very expensive program. Oh, look, somebody's following me around. Let's go for a walk. As for your first question, my favorite food item is tough. I mean, obviously, you've got the desserts or the, of course I'm blanking on it. We're right near it actually. The Dole Whips are really great. I think, I'm not a big picky eater, so the food items don't matter to me as much. When I think of my favorite places to eat at Disney, it's not based on the food, it's based on the place. It's the Sci-Fi Drive-In Theater. It's the 50s Primetime Cafe. It's Cosmic Rays Starlight. It's places like that where the atmosphere is really cool. The food is give or take. I'm fine with just a hamburger and fries. Call me old-fashioned. I did eat at the buffet in the Fort Wilderness campgrounds where we stayed at the cabin when I went with my friends, and we ate like kings. It was magnificent. There was no one good food item there. It was just all incredible, and so all of it, all the food is my favorite. And lastly this week, Pooh Bear 408 asks, what would you like to see in the future of Walt Disney World? What an excellent question to end on. I want to see more originality. I want to see whoever takes over for Iger to sort of revitalize the idea of original concepts. Let's not forget that some of our favorite rides, the Pirates of the Caribbean, Space Mountain, the Haunted Mansion, It's a Small World, Carousel of Progress, these rides were all original ideas. They weren't based off of a cartoon or a movie that needed to be tied in or a product. They were just the Imagineers being Imagineers, and I hope whoever takes over, even though they've spent a lot of money on Star Wars and Marvel, that I hope they give the Imagineers the freedom to really use their imagination and earn that first part of their title and make some original concepts that hopefully we can end up loving, and then generations before us or after us can end up loving as well. In any case, I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you got your questions answered. If you have a question, feel free to leave it in the comments of this video. I try to get to all of them. Some of them are repeats. Some of them are quick ones that I can answer in the comments themselves, so I try to get to them there. Whatever you're doing this week, make the most of it because it makes it that much better. And I hope to see you all here next time for the next episode of the MC Magic, or wow, I should really pin down the names of these series before I sign off, of the Minecraft Disney Q&A. Bye, everybody.